What's up, YouTube? I'm bored. So here's an iceberg. I was on Reddit last week and I found under the Iceberg subreddit by user Kindlypatrick the Weird America iceberg, and I thought it was good enough to make a video on. Now, this iceberg ranges from topics including cryptids, paranormal phenomenon, and just weird history in general that they don't tell you about in school. This is going to be a short intro because this is my first video. I have no sponsors. I don't have any advertisement. So let's get into it. Tier 1 starts off with a banger. Everyone's favorite cryptid. You know him, you love him. Bigfoot. Legends surrounding Bigfoot are older than the United States itself. Indigenous populations across the North American continent, including my grandmother's own tribe, the Ojibwe, had legends of tall, hairy men that lived separate from human tribes. Not entirely human, but not entirely animal. Now, European settlers were prone to disbelieve these stories from native peoples, being these advanced European colonialists. Advanced. It was not until 1967 that the veracity of these claims were given more credence with the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Two ranchers in the Sierra Nevada mountain range caught on camera a tall, hairy, bipedal hominid walking through the mountains. And this footage made its way across the nation. News stories covered it, newspapers featured articles about it. And now, because of that footage from the Sierra Nevadas, you cannot go anywhere without hearing Bigfoot stories across this country. Bigfoot has become just so popular that he's probably arguably the most popular cryptid apart from Mothman and the Dogman. Yeah, he's pretty popular. In fact, I live in Minnesota, and the town of Reamer, which is about 2 hours north of me, claims to be the Bigfoot capital of the world. And apparently they have so many sightings that during their Bigfoot Fest every summer, they have hundreds of people come there to talk about their Bigfoot sightings, which I thought was pretty cool, and glad that he put him first on the list, so thank you kindly, Patrick. The next entry on our list is the Roswell incident. In 1947, an unidentified flying object crash-landed out in the deserts surrounding the United States Army Air Corps base in Roswell, New Mexico. The United States Army was quick to contain the site and declare that it was a weather balloon that had crashed. A lot of people called the events into question, this time being the Cold War, paranoia is high, but also during the sci-fi boom. And many people believed that it was an extraterrestrial craft and that a species of alien were aboard. Now, these rumors abounded until 1979 when they were seemingly confirmed by Air Force officer Jesse Marcel, and in the next year, 1980, the book The Roswell Incident was released, declaring that it was a UFO and that it was the Greys. Now, there's speculation continuing to this day. Personally, I don't believe in aliens, so it probably was a weather balloon. I never said I was going to be unbiased in this. This next one is just really cool. It just shows Midwestern weirdness. In Alliance, Nebraska, there is an exact replica of Stonehenge using classic cars painted gray called Carhenge. Carhenge. It was created by a guy named Jim Randers who had studied in England in the 1970s and grew obsessed with Stonehenge. So in the 1980s, he collected a bunch of classic cars and decided to build a monument replicating his obsession. He dedicated it to his father in 1987, and it has stood there ever since. I actually want to visit. The weird thing is my wife knew about it, but she's from Kansas, so it's like her neighbor. The story of D.B. Cooper is really interesting because it's probably the case of the most successful criminal evasions in United States history. On November 24th, 1971, a man going by the pseudonym Dan Cooper boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle, declaring that he had a bomb mid-flight. When they landed in Seattle, passengers were evacuated and he demanded $200,000, 4 parachutes, and a flight to Mexico. The authorities caved into these demands, and on the flight to Mexico, he jumps out of the plane with the ransom money and the parachutes, never to be seen again. When newspapers first got a hold of this story, they misnamed him as D.B. Cooper. Not that it really matters because we don't know his real name, we'll probably never know who it was, and the money was never seen again, apart from $5,800 that was found on the Columbia River about 10 years later. Now, was this because DB drowned in the Columbia River? Did he just leave some of it? We don't really know. Maybe we'll never know. Now, there's a lot of people who say that they've solved the case, they know who it is, he might be still living in like Palm Beach or somewhere, but will we ever know? Probably not. The Hatfield and McCoy feud was the most notorious feud in United States history, with the rival Hatfields of West Virginia feuding with the family of McCoy in Kentucky along the Tug Fork River. Now, this feud got out of hand real quick. Many people believe that it started over a trial in which a Hatfield family member stole a pig from a McCoy family member. and violence and bloodshed ensued. So much to the point that the states of West Virginia and Kentucky were considering going to war with each other. We nearly started another civil war over a pig. Well, that's happened in other wars too. Now, the Hatfield and McCoy families generally live in peace, and the story of the Hatfield-McCoy feud has become a show in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We saw the History Channel miniseries on it with Kevin Costner and Bill Paxton, and it's just become a legend in American history over feuding families. Typos in the Constitution just refers to numerous misspellings and archaic language used in the Constitution, such as Pennsylvania being spelled with one N instead of two, and the archaic form of the word choose, spelled Chuse. That's about it. Kilroy Was Here was a popular graffiti used by United States service members in both the European and Pacific fronts of World War II to signify how far the United States had advanced in their combat zone. No one really knows how it started or where the origins are from, but a lot of historians now say that this was the first meme that originated in the United States. Hobo codes are just a series of pictographs that were used by hobos and transient workers during the Great Depression to communicate safe zones and other things that they could find on their ways to find work on the railroads. Now, these stretch back to the 1870s, but they did not gain popularity until a majority of the United States workforce was transient during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. The Winchester Mystery House, aka the Winchester Mansion, was built in San Jose, California, by heir to the Winchester Firearms Company, Sarah Winchester, the wife of William Wirt Winchester. Now, after her husband died, she got really into the spiritualist movement and decided to conduct a seance to try to contact the soul of her dead husband. Well, that didn't work out. She apparently was confronted by ghosts who were killed by Winchester rifles across the Old West, and they stated that she should build an endless house. And she caved into the demands of the ghosts and created a house with nonsensical demands. Stairways that lead to nowhere, doors that just open to the grounds below, and other oddities and stuff like that. Sarah passed away in 1922, but visitors still say that they hear ghosts and see apparitions. Now, do I personally believe them? Not really. I think she was just crazy. She's just crazy. William Henry Harrison had the shortest tenure of any president in United States history. He was the last president born during the colonial period and made his career in politics and in the military. His nickname, Old Tippecanoe, comes from the eponymous battle where he defeated Tecumseh and the Northwest Confederacy. Now, during his inauguration speech in 1841, he talked for so long and the weather turned bad that he got sick with pneumonia and died a month later. And that's really all he's known for as president. His successor, John Tyler, continued leading the nation and advocated for taking over Mexican territory in the contiguous United States, which we eventually did during the Mexican-American War. Wrestling Lincoln refers to Abraham Lincoln's favorite passion, which was wrestling, and he was so good that he suffered one defeat out of 300 bouts during the Black Hawk War, which was the only war in which he served. And in 1992, he was put in the American Wrestling Hall of Fame. We have a president in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. God bless this country. Legend of the Octopus refers to Al the Octopus, the unofficial mascot of the Detroit Red Wings hockey team. Now, why does a Detroit hockey team have a mascot that is an octopus? Well, it started during the 1952 Stanley Cup playoffs when two brothers threw an octopus that they didn't sell at their market onto the ice. And after they won the Stanley Cup, they viewed this as good luck. So across the Red Wings history since 1952, whenever they have a chance at the Stanley Cup playoffs, people will throw just dozens of octopuses. Octopi?
Octopuses. Octopi?
Anyway, they'll throw them onto the ice for good luck. Now, I don't know much about hockey, so if they've won the Stanley Cup since then, you can tell me in the comments, and maybe the octopus actually works. I don't know. Emperor Norton was Joshua Abraham Norton, an English immigrant to California during the Gold Rush. In the 1850s, he started dressing up in military garb, declaring that he was the Emperor of North America and the protector of Mexico. Now, this guy just became the local eccentric that grew into a legend in California, and people would travel all across the country just to see him and his military guard, and he would make these weird declarations as emperor. And in his honor, several places in San Francisco are named after him. He's just like he's just one of the cool guys in American history that's just like, I'm gonna be emperor. I don't have power, but yeah, I do what I want. The Kentucky meat shower occurred in 1876 in Bath County, Kentucky, where for an hour straight, meat-like substances rained down from the sky, and no one has an explanation for it. Some people today have tested the meat that has been saved from this incident, and they have no biological markers saying what it was from. Several people believe that it was some oceanic weather phenomenon bringing certain things in. Other scientists just say it's vulture vomit, which is fucking nasty. Ew. No thanks. Dorothy Gibson was an actress and a socialite in the early 1900s who survived the Titanic disaster, only to later go on to star in the first film adaptation of the Titanic disaster in 1912 in what is now a lost film. I mean, that's one way to process your trauma, I think. She would later live in Europe and collaborate with the Axis forces, which is a weird pivot, but okay. Bobby Leach was a stuntman in the Barnum and Bailey Circus who was the first man to put himself in a steel drum and go over Niagara Falls. He wasn't the first person to do this. The first person was Annie Taylor, who completed this feat in 1901 with minimal injuries. But when Bobby did it 10 years later, he suffered so many severe fractures that he was in the hospital for 6 months. He would later go on to die by slipping on an orange peel, and the cut that he got ended up becoming infected with gangrene. He slipped on an orange peel and died. Still a badass, though. The North Hollywood shootout occurred on February 28, 1997, when career criminals Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasaran, I don't speak Romanian, attempted to rob a Bank of America location, armed head to toe in body armor and firearms illegally converted to fire fully automatic. So when they get there, they realize there's not as much money in the vault as they thought. So out of anger, Matasaran decides to unload his drum magazine into the vault. Police were alerted, and what ensued was an hour-long firefight between criminals armed with military-style weapons and body armor and police who carried 38 caliber revolvers and 12-gauge shotguns. But eventually the police were able to overwhelm both the criminals, get them separated. Phillips ended up accidentally discharging his Beretta 92 FS and resulting in a fatal injury, whereas Matasaran was surrounded and shot in the legs, where he eventually bled out in police custody. And after this, police departments across America decided to adopt more high-powered and modern weaponry. That's why you see cops nowadays carry Glock 17s and ARs in their patrol cars. The Howard Dean scream refers to Howard Dean, former governor of Vermont, who sought the nomination for Democratic presidential nomination in 2004. Now, in 2004, when he lost the Iowa primary, he tried to give a speech that stirred up the crowd, and at the end released a high-pitched, almost squeal-like yeah, and that resulted in just media scrutiny. He lost a lot of popularity, eventually losing the nomination to John Kerry. And I just thought this was kind of funny because this is what it took for politicians to get scrutinized when we have just the political situation that we have now with all these politicians. L. Ron Hubbard. Everyone knows he's the founder of Scientology, Dianetics, all that stuff. If you want to deep dive on Scientology, just watch the South Park episode. But there's actually a lot more interesting stories about L. Ron Hubbard's life apart from Scientology. He faked having a college degree during World War II so he would get a commission in the Navy. He commanded 2 ships but was so bad at it that the Navy discharged him. He was also friends with Jack Parsons, who ran the Jet Propulsion Lab in California, and they both bonded over their love of the religion of Thelema. Yeah, the Aleister Crowley religion. And it's said that L. Ron Hubbard was present during Jack Parsons' Babylon Rising ceremony, in which he tried to conjure the Thelemite demon goddess Babylon into the world. Well, anyway, Jack Parsons died, L. Ron Hubbard stole his wife, and ended up founding Scientology and writing the space opera. Last but not least for Tier 1 is the most famous mass disappearance in American history. the disappearance of the Roanoke colony. Now, the Roanoke colony was supposed to be the first English settlement in North America, but it failed miserably. It was founded by John White and over 100 settlers from England, and they decided to stake their claim on a sandy beach that could not support crops that they were used to growing in England. Plus, they had to deal with hostile tribes who really didn't want English settlers in their area and said go away, but they didn't. So, running out of supplies, enduring hostile attacks, John White decides to book passage back to England in order to retrieve supplies, leaving behind over 100 settlers. Now, when he gets to England and Spain liked going to war at the time, so they went to war for 3 years, while John White was in his own special hell, England. Now, in 1590, he was able to book passage along with certain supplies that he was able to bring back to the colony. But when he arrived at the colony, he found all the buildings abandoned and not a soul in sight. The only evidence as to where the colonists went was carved into a tree, and that word was Croatoan. Now, people can speculate all they want. They can follow the stupid American Horror Story series, but Croatoan is just a neighboring island. And since then, there's been speculation as to what happened to the colony, ranging from the most absurd being alien abductions to just being wiped out by disease and Native American attack. All right, guys, that was Tier 1 of the Weird America Iceberg. As always, I'd like to thank the creator of the original Iceberg, Kindlypatrick. Thank you so much for that. That was awesome. I loved it. Hoping to do Tier 2 in the near future and eventually continue on with all the tiers and release it in a series. I'll probably release more diverse content too. Like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys later.